Dr. Alan Cross stood in the observation chamber, his hands resting lightly on the glass railing. Beyond it, the Predator Index core filled the room below like a quiet mechanical ocean. Tall black pillars circled a glowing sphere of light, threads of data moving through it like slow lightning. The system had analyzed thousands of species over centuries, and it had never failed to give an answer. This time it was analyzing humans. Alan had waited most of his career for this moment. As a xenobiologist for the Galactic Union, he had seen wonders most beings only read about. Still, Earth and its people had always stayed in the back of his mind. Humans were late to the stars, noisy, curious, and difficult to summarize. Even now, many in the Union thought them simple and harmless. Officer Sarah Lane stood beside him, her posture straight but relaxed. She wore the standard gray uniform of Union security, though she still moved like someone used to gravity and solid ground. She had been assigned to oversee the procedure, but her expression showed mild boredom rather than concern. "Routine scan," she said, glancing at the display panel. "The index will sort it out in a few minutes. Probably class 3 or 4. Social omnivore, low threat." Alan nodded, though he did not fully share her confidence. "That's what the numbers suggest," he said. "On paper." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You sound unsure." Alan smiled faintly. "Experience," he replied. "Whenever something looks too neat, it usually isn't." Below them, technicians moved around the base of the core. Human DNA samples floated in sealed light capsules, carefully prepared and verified. Blood, tissue, neural patterns, even ancient genetic markers pulled from long-extinct human relatives. The Predator Index did not simply read DNA. It compared biology, history, environment, and behavior all at once. A soft tone echoed through the chamber as the system acknowledged the input. Analysis initiated, the artificial voice said, calm and neutral. Sarah leaned back slightly. "You know, when we first found Earth, I thought humans would rank higher. They're loud. They argue. They fight among themselves. They also cooperate," Alan said. "More than most." Sarah shrugged. "So do many species." "Yes," Alan agreed, "but humans do it differently." The main display lit up with early results. Human physical traits scrolled past. Bone density, muscle strength, reaction time. Nothing unusual. Their bodies were fragile compared to heavy-world species, slow compared to flight-adapted ones. Even their senses were limited. The index marked most of it in neutral blue. Sarah glanced at the screen. "See? Average." Alan followed the data closely. "Average bodies," he said. "But bodies are only part of the picture." The display shifted to environmental adaptation. Heat, cold, radiation, pressure. The colors began to change, not dramatically, but enough to catch Alan's attention. Humans showed survival ranges wider than expected. Not exceptional in any one area, but flexible across many. "That's interesting," he murmured. Sarah leaned forward. "Is it?" "Most species specialize," Alan explained. "Humans don't. They adjust instead." The index moved on to neurological patterns. Emotional range, stress response, social bonding. This was where many species revealed their limits. Too much fear led to collapse. Too much aggression led to extinction. Balance was rare. The system slowed. Sarah noticed it immediately. Did it just pause? Alan frowned. It shouldn't. Lines of data looped on the screen, repeating and rearranging. Emotional markers overlapped in strange ways. Empathy indicators appeared alongside aggression triggers. Altruism and self-interest sat uncomfortably close together. "That's messy," Sarah said. Alan's eyes narrowed. "It's complex." The index processed social behavior next. Cooperation models, hierarchy tolerance, conflict resolution. Human history poured into the system. Wars, alliances, collapses, recoveries. The screen flickered between warning yellow and neutral blue. Sarah crossed her arms. "They fight a lot." "They also rebuild," Alan replied. Over and over. A technician's voice came through the intercom. "Dr. Cross, the index is requesting extended processing time." Sarah straightened. "Extended? For a first scan?" Alan tapped the control panel. "Approved." The chamber lights dimmed slightly as the system diverted more power. The Predator Index rarely needed extra time. It was designed to see patterns instantly. Delay meant uncertainty. Alan felt a familiar tension settle in his chest. Not fear exactly, but anticipation. He remembered his first briefing on humans years ago. A species that had nearly destroyed itself more than once. A species that had built weapons capable of ending their world, then argued endlessly about whether to use them. A species that invented rules to restrain itself, then broke them, then rewrote them again. Sarah, he said quietly, do you know what the index is really measuring? She glanced at him. Threat level. That's the label, he said. But underneath, it measures predictability. She considered that. And humans? Alan watched the screen as more data streamed in. Humans are hard to predict. The index began simulating human responses to pressure, resource loss, external threats, environmental collapse. In many scenarios, humans failed. Governments fell. Systems broke. The screen filled with red markers. Sarah let out a breath. There it is. But then the simulations continued. After collapse came adaptation. Small groups formed. Knowledge was preserved in fragments. Cooperation returned, slower but stronger. The red faded into yellow, then blue. Alan felt his pulse quicken. It doesn't stop, he said. The index pushed the scenarios further. Increased pressure. Repeated loss. Long-term stress. Other species showed clear breaking points. Humans bent, fractured, and somehow held. Sarah stared now, her earlier boredom gone. They just keep going. Yes, Alan said softly. They do. The system shifted to a final preliminary summary. Instead of a clear category, a symbol appeared, a waiting marker. Provisional status pending, the artificial voice said. Sarah looked at Alan. I've never seen that. Neither have I, he admitted. Around them, the chamber felt quieter, as if the machine itself was thinking. Alan realized that what unsettled him was not the idea that humans were dangerous. It was that they were undecided. Not locked into instinct alone. Not bound fully by logic either. They chose. Alan straightened and folded his hands behind his back. This is only the beginning, he said. Sarah nodded slowly, eyes still on the screen. I thought today would be boring. So did the galaxy, Alan replied. Below them, the predator index continued to work, silent and patient, as it tried to understand a species that refused to fit neatly into any box. The predator index was not supposed to hesitate. It was built to decide, to sort, to label life across the galaxy in clear and final terms. Yet the main display remained unstable, numbers repeating and folding back into themselves like a broken reflection. Analyst Tom Reed stood at his station, staring at the cascading data. He had worked with the index for 12 years and had memorized its patterns. This was not one of them. It's looping again, he said, his voice calm but tight. Dr. Alan Cross turned from the observation railing and walked toward Tom's console. Officer Sarah Lane followed, her boots echoing softly against the metal floor. The hum of the index core felt louder now, uneven, almost restless. Show me, Alan said. Tom expanded the display. Lines of genetic code twisted across the screen, highlighted in shifting colors. Blue for restraint. Red for aggression. Green for cooperation. Yellow for dominance. The colors should have separated cleanly, forming a clear profile. Instead they overlapped. The system keeps trying to isolate primary traits, Tom explained. But every time it does, it finds an equal counterweight. Sarah frowned. Meaning? Meaning humans don't lean far enough in one direction, Tom said. Or maybe they lean in several directions at once. Alan studied the screen carefully. Human DNA markers glowed faintly, layered with behavioral data pulled from history, culture, and recorded neural patterns. The index tried again to assign priority. Again it failed. A soft alert chimed. Conflict detected, the artificial voice said. Re-evaluating. Tom exhaled slowly. That's not supposed to happen at this stage. Sarah crossed her arms. Is it broken? No, Alan said. It's confused. The system shifted focus to aggression markers. Muscular response genes activated under threat. Adrenal spikes. Neural pathways linked to rapid decision-making. The red indicators brightened. Sarah nodded. There. That looks familiar. But before the index could lock the result, blue markers surged alongside the red. Empathy responses. Stress dampening. Social concern. Signals that urged restraint even under pressure. Tom tapped his console. See that? The same trigger activates both systems. That doesn't make sense, Sarah said. One should override the other. In most species, yes, Tom replied. In humans, they activate together. Alan felt a strange chill. They feel the urge to strike, he said, and the urge to stop at the same time. The index moved on to dominance behavior. Hierarchy formation. Leadership instincts. Competition. Yellow indicators rose quickly. Humans competed for resources, status, influence. The data showed countless examples. Then green followed. Cooperation. Group survival. Shared burden. Sacrifice. They build hierarchies, Tom said, then argue about them. And sometimes tear them down, Alan added. The system attempted a rank again. Classification unstable, the voice announced. The chamber fell quiet. Even the technicians below had stopped moving, drawn by the growing tension in the air. This was no longer a routine scan. Tom leaned closer to his screen. I'm going to isolate a single trait cluster, he said. Strip out culture. Focus on raw biology. He entered the command. The index complied. The display simplified. Pure genetic instructions. Ancient markers. Survival instincts formed long before cities, laws, or technology. This was the core of what humans were. For a moment, the data looked clearer. Then the loops returned. Tom's brow furrowed. That's not possible. Alan stepped closer. What is it? The restraint genes, Tom said slowly. They're reinforced. Sarah tilted her head. Reinforced how? Tom highlighted a section of the code. These markers didn't weaken aggression. They sit beside it. Like braces. Alan understood. They don't remove the capacity for violence, he said. They contain it. Yes, Tom said. It's like building a powerful engine and then installing multiple braking systems. Sarah let out a short laugh. That sounds risky. It is, Tom agreed. If the brakes fail. The index began running deeper simulations without prompting. Stress tests escalated. The system pushed humans into extreme conditions. Loss of resources, long-term fear, external pressure. At first, the results were chaotic. Human groups fractured. Conflicts broke out. Authority failed. The red markers flared. Sarah sighed. There's the breaking point. But the index did not stop. Time advanced in the simulations. After collapse came adaptation. Small groups reorganized. New rules formed. Trust returned, uneven but real. Cooperation rebuilt itself. Green and blue markers strengthened. Tom stared. They recover faster than expected. Alan nodded. They always have. The index increased pressure again. Repeated cycles of stress and recovery. Other species showed decline with each loop. Humans fluctuated but stabilized. This shouldn't be possible, Tom said quietly. Biology doesn't like contradiction. But humans do, Alan replied. The system tried a different approach. It compared humans to known predator species. The results did not align. It compared them to prey species. Again mismatch. Social species. Solitary species. None fit. The index paused. A long pause. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as processing demand increased. Sarah shifted her weight, uneasy. I don't like it when machines go quiet. Tom swallowed. It's not quiet. It's thinking harder than it ever has. Alan watched the core pulse slowly, its light dimming and brightening like a measured breath. He felt a growing sense of weight, as if something important was being uncovered layer by layer. The display changed again. This time, the index showed probability paths instead of fixed outcomes. Thousands of branching futures spread across the screen. Human responses varied wildly. In some paths, humans destroyed themselves. In others, they survived against impossible odds. What determines the difference? Sarah asked. Tom scanned the variables. Choice, he said. Alan looked at him. Explain. It's not just environment or threat, Tom said. It's decision-making under pressure. Values. Belief systems. Internal limits. The index highlighted a recurring pattern. When humans believed something mattered, family, ideals, survival of others, their restraint and aggression aligned instead of clashing. They don't suppress one side, Alan said. They direct it. Yes, Tom replied. That's what the system can't rank. It's not instinct alone. The index attempted to assign a provisional score anyway. The number fluctuated wildly, jumping between low threat and high risk. Error, the voice said. Contradictory indicators detected. Sarah let out a slow breath. So what are they? Tom leaned back in his chair. They're balanced, he said. But not neutral. Alan felt the truth of that settle in his chest. Balance was not weakness. It was tension held in place. The predator index displayed one final note before suspending classification. Species exhibits controlled contradiction, the voice said. Further observation required. The screen dimmed. No alarms sounded. No warnings were issued. Yet everyone in the chamber felt the same quiet unease. Alan folded his arms. The galaxy expects simple answers, he said. Tom nodded. Humans aren't simple. Sarah looked back at the silent core. If the index can't decide what they are, she said, what happens next? Alan did not answer right away. He watched the faint glow of the system, still processing in the background, still searching for certainty. For the first time, he said at last, the index has met something it can't place above or below anything else. Tom's gaze stayed on the darkened screen. That might make humans the most dangerous species, he said, or the safest. Silence filled the chamber again as the Predator Index prepared for deeper analysis, and no one could say which outcome would frighten the galaxy more. The Predator Index shifted into full simulation mode without waiting for permission. The core brightened and the chamber filled with a low, steady hum. On the main screen, virtual environments formed one after another, each designed to push a species toward failure. Captain Mark Ellis stood near the back of the chamber, his hands clasped behind him. As a Union officer, he had overseen threat assessments for dozens of worlds. He was not a scientist, but he understood patterns. And the patterns forming on the screen were unlike anything he had seen before. The first simulation placed humans on a dying world. Resources were scarce. The climate was unstable. Food production failed within months. For most species, this scenario ended quickly. Human cities fractured almost at once. Governments collapsed. Conflict broke out. The red indicators spiked. Several observers relaxed. There it is, one technician murmured. Collapse phase. But the simulation continued. Groups broke away from failing systems. Smaller communities formed. Old rules were discarded. New ones appeared, imperfect but functional. Humans shared what little they had. Knowledge was passed on by word and record, even as technology failed. Green indicators slowly returned. Mark leaned forward slightly. The index increased the pressure. Disease spread. Population dropped. The stress markers rose sharply, yet something unexpected happened. The human stress response did not remain constant. It shifted. Dr. Alan Cross noticed it first. They're changing internally, he said. Tom Reed brought up the data. Neural patterns are adapting. Hormonal responses are stabilizing faster with each cycle. Sarah Lane frowned. You're saying their bodies are learning? Yes, Tom said. And their minds. The index ran the same scenario again with slight changes. Humans failed earlier but recovered faster. Their emotional responses became more controlled. Panic gave way to planning. They remember, Alan said. Not individually. As a species. The next simulation placed humans under constant external threat. An unseen force pressed against their territory, limiting movement and communication. Fear dominated early responses. Red surged again. Mark watched closely. He had seen species react to fear before. Most froze. Some lashed out until they burned themselves away. Humans did neither for long. They organized patrols. They rotated duties. They created signals, schedules, shared responsibility. Stress markers remained high, but discipline formed around them. The fear isn't going away, Sarah said. No, Alan replied. They're working with it. The index highlighted a pattern. Under pressure, human biology increased alertness, strength, and endurance. At the same time, psychological systems reinforced cooperation and trust within groups. They don't separate mind and body, Tom said. They stack them. Mark's eyes narrowed. That sounds like a force multiplier. The simulations escalated. The index removed hope variables. No rescue. No relief. Endless strain. Human groups fractured again. Some failed completely. The red zones flared bright. But others adapted in darker, quieter ways. They simplified goals. Survival became smaller, more focused. Protecting one person, one group, one idea. Mark felt a strange weight in his chest. They shrink their world, he said, instead of giving up. Alan nodded. That's how they endure. The index began cross-comparing simulations. It measured how quickly a species changed behavior under repeated failure. Humans ranked far above the norm. Adaptive speed is increasing, the voice announced. Behavioral reinforcement detected. Tom stared at the numbers. Their limits aren't fixed. Sarah shook her head. Everyone has limits. Yes, Tom said. But humans push theirs outward. The index ran a new test. It introduced moral pressure instead of physical threat. Humans were forced to choose between survival and harming others. The results varied. Some chose survival at any cost. Others refused and accepted loss. The system struggled to quantify the outcome. Mark watched silently. He had commanded fleets. He had ordered retreats. He understood the cost of decisions. What he saw on the screen unsettled him more than violence ever had. "They argue with themselves," he said quietly. Alan looked at him. "That's important." The index attempted to predict long-term outcomes. It ran thousands of futures based on small changes in human choice. The results spread across the display like branching roots. "There's no single path," Sarah said. "No," Tom agreed. "But there's a trend." The index highlighted it. When humans believed their actions mattered, their resilience increased. When they felt responsibility, their aggression became controlled. When they lost meaning, they fell apart faster. "They don't just survive pressure," Alan said. "They respond to purpose." The system paused again, then restructured its analysis. It stopped measuring attack capability. It stopped counting casualties and damage. Instead, it tracked growth under stress. Mark noticed the change. "It's not looking for violence anymore." "No," Tom said slowly. "It's measuring potential." The word hung in the air. Potential for what was the unspoken question. The index ran one final scenario. Humans were placed in a stable, peaceful environment with no threat at all. Over time, internal conflict increased. Complacency formed. Innovation slowed. Then pressure returned. Humans adapted faster than before. "They need resistance," Sarah said. "They sharpen against it," Alan replied. Mark folded his arms. He had always believed strength came from order and control. What he was seeing challenged that belief. "They're dangerous," he said at last. Sarah looked at him sharply. "Because they fight?" "No," Mark said. "Because they grow." The index presented a summary chart. Human collapse rate, high. Human recovery rate, higher. Adaptive reinforcement, exponential under stress. "Species demonstrates escalation through adversity," the voice announced. Mark felt a chill. Escalation was a word the Union feared. Alan broke the silence. "The index was built to warn us about threats," he said. "But this?" "It's not a warning," Tom said. "It's a question." Mark stared at the glowing core. "What happens if something pushes them too far?" Alan answered softly. "The same thing that always happens." "They change," Mark said. "Yes," Alan replied. "And they don't always change back." The index dimmed slightly, storing its data for deeper evaluation. No alarms sounded. No emergency protocols activated. Yet Captain Mark Ellis knew something fundamental had shifted. The Predator Index had not found a monster. It had found a species shaped by pressure, strengthened by struggle, and guided not by instinct alone, but by the ability to choose what it would become. And that, Mark realized, was far more powerful than violence. The report from the Predator Index did not spread all at once. It moved slowly at first, passing through secure channels, filtered by analysts and advisors. Even so, unease followed it wherever it went. On the central world of the Galactic Council, the chamber filled earlier than scheduled. Council members arrived in quiet groups, their movements careful, their voices low. The air felt heavy not with fear but with discomfort. A large display floated above the chamber floor. It showed a simple summary of the index results. No numbers. No ranks. Only statements. Unclassified. Adaptive under pressure. High potential variance. That alone was enough to trouble them. Counselor Henry Walsh sat in his assigned place, his thin fingers folded together. His species valued order above all else. Their society had been stable for thousands of years because deviation was not allowed. He did not like uncertainty. "This is not acceptable," he said, breaking the silence. "The index exists to give clarity." Across the chamber, Counselor Linda Shaw inclined her head slightly. "The index gave us honesty," she replied. "Not clarity." Walsh's eyes narrowed. "Honesty without order is chaos." A soft murmur of agreement followed him. The display changed, showing selected historical records of humanity. Wars. Revolutions. Periods of peace. Rebuilding after collapse. Each event was brief, stripped of emotion, reduced to facts. Counselor Peter Hall studied the screen. "They destroy themselves," he said. "Repeatedly." "Yes," Linda replied. "And yet they continue." Another counselor leaned forward. "That alone makes them dangerous." "Or resilient," Linda said. The chamber grew tense. Many of the council species had risen to power by strict control. Their laws were absolute. Their populations were managed carefully. Conflict was eliminated early, often by force. It was the only way they believed to avoid extinction. Humans challenged that belief. The display shifted again, this time focusing on human governance. Early tribal rules. Written laws. Charters. Rights. Systems designed not just to command but to limit authority. Counselor Maria Bennett spoke for the first time. They place limits on their own power. Walsh scoffed. And break them. Yes, Maria said calmly. Then rebuild them. The index highlighted a pattern. After every major failure, humans created new rules. Sometimes better. Sometimes worse. But always with the idea that power needed boundaries. That is weakness, one counselor said. No, Linda replied. It is restraint. Walsh tapped the arm of his seat. Restraint fails. And yet, Maria said, their history shows restraint returning again and again. The chamber fell quiet as the screen showed something new. A comparison chart. Species that ruled through control versus those that relied on shared responsibility. Most control-based societies were stable but fragile. When their systems broke, recovery was rare. Human societies broke often. And recovered often. That recovery comes at great cost, Peter said. Yes, Maria agreed. And they remember that cost. That was what unsettled many of them. Humans did not forget their mistakes. They argued over them. Recorded them. Taught them. Their history was not hidden or erased. It was studied openly, even painfully. Counselor James Carter shifted in his seat. Why would a species keep records of its own failures? To avoid repeating them, Linda said. But they still do, Carter replied. Yes, Maria said. Just not in the same way. The index report moved to cultural behavior. Art created during war. Music written after loss. Stories about hope in dark times. Walsh frowned. Why is this included? Because culture shapes behavior, Linda said. Even the index sees that now. Some counselors grew uneasy. Culture was difficult to control. That was why many societies suppressed it. The display showed a final summary of human traits. Capacity for dominance, high. Capacity for restraint, high. Internal conflict, persistent. External behavior, variable. No balance, Walsh said sharply. No, Linda replied. Tension. That word caused a ripple of discomfort. Tension meant instability. But it also meant energy. A younger council member spoke up hesitantly. If they have such power, why haven't they already tried to rule others? The question lingered. Maria answered. Because much of their energy is spent restraining themselves. That was the moment many in the chamber felt exposed. Their own species had risen by removing internal conflict. By silencing dissent. By enforcing unity. Humans did the opposite. They argue openly, Peter said. They protest. They resist authority. And yet, Linda said, they continue to function. The display showed human responses to first contact. Caution. Curiosity. Fear. Cooperation. No immediate aggression. No attempt at domination. Walsh's voice sharpened. That may change. Yes, Maria said. It may. The index projection showed branching outcomes. In some, humans became conquerors. In others, they became partners. In many, they became something in between. There is no single future, Carter said quietly. No, Linda agreed. Because their choices matter. That was the true problem. Most species in the council preferred predictability. Humans offered none. A silence settled over the chamber as council members absorbed the implications. This was not a threat that could be measured by fleets or weapons. It was a mirror. Humans showed what happened when power was paired with conscience, even an imperfect one. When control was challenged from within. When laws were written not just to command others but to limit oneself. Walsh leaned back slowly. If they fail, he said, they will fail loudly. Yes, Maria said. But if they succeed. She did not finish the sentence. The display dimmed, ending the presentation. No vote was taken that day. No decision made. The council adjourned in silence, each member carrying the same uneasy thought. Humans were not dangerous because they lacked limits. They were dangerous because they kept choosing to create them. And the galaxy did not yet know how to respond to a species that could dominate, but instead argued endlessly about whether it should. The chamber prepared for the human response with careful attention. Security systems were active, though no one openly admitted they were nervous. The Galactic Council had seen many ambassadors speak before. Most arrived defensive. Some arrived proud. Others arrived afraid. Ambassador Claire Morgan arrived calm. She stood alone at the center platform, her hands resting at her sides. She wore simple formal clothing, dark and unmarked, with no symbols of rank or power. Her face showed focus, not tension. She looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes of council members without challenge or apology. The Predator Index core hovered behind her, its light steady. It was recording everything. Counselor Linda Shaw spoke first. Ambassador Morgan, the Council has reviewed the Index report. Humanity's classification remains unresolved. Claire nodded once. We expected that. A soft murmur passed through the chamber. Counselor Henry Walsh leaned forward. You do not seem surprised. Claire's voice was clear and even. We have lived with unresolved questions about ourselves for a long time. Some counselors shifted in their seats. Walsh continued. The index shows your species has a high capacity for dominance. Yes, Claire said simply. And a high capacity for restraint, he added. Yes. Walsh frowned. These traits do not usually coexist. Claire allowed a small pause. They coexist because they must. The chamber grew quiet. She continued, we know our history is not clean. We fought wars. We harmed each other. We damaged our world. We do not deny this. The display behind her lit briefly, showing human historical markers. Conflicts. Recovery. Reform. Claire did not look back at it. We are not proud of every chapter, she said. But we are responsible for all of them. Counselor Peter Hall spoke. Many species admit mistakes. Few survive repeating them. Claire turned her gaze toward him. We survive because we argue about them. That drew attention. We argue in public, she went on. We record our failures. We teach them to our children. Not to shame them but to warn them. The index core pulsed softly. Walsh's tone sharpened. And yet you still repeat those failures. Yes, Claire said. Because restraint is not permanent. It is a choice we make again and again. That answer unsettled many of them. Counselor Maria Bennett leaned forward slightly. Are you saying humans are always on the edge of losing control? Claire considered her words carefully. We are always aware that we could, she said. That awareness matters. The chamber remained silent. Claire continued, we learned early that power without limits destroys trust. And trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. The index highlighted new data as she spoke. Cultural markers. Shared values. Moral frameworks passed down through generations. Counselor James Carter spoke next. The index suggests your restraint is cultural, not biological. Yes, Claire replied. That is correct. That makes it fragile, Carter said. It makes it teachable, Claire answered. The words echoed softly. She took a slow breath. We do not pretend our systems are perfect. Our laws change. Our ethics evolve. Sometimes slowly. Sometimes painfully. She looked around the chamber again. But every time we reach for power, there is a voice that asks, should we? The Predator Index recorded the statement. Walsh shook his head slightly. Questions slow progress. Yes, Claire said. They also prevent regret. A quiet tension settled over the room. The display shifted, showing something new. Not statistics but patterns. Stories. Human movements for reform. Limits placed on authority. Agreements that reduced power rather than increased it. Counselor Linda spoke softly. You chose to bind yourselves. Claire nodded. Because unbound power always turns inward first. That struck deeper than expected. Several council members exchanged uneasy looks. Their own histories were clean on the surface but built on silence. Counselor Hall asked, what happens when humans stop choosing restraint? Claire answered without hesitation. Then we remind each other why we must. The index highlighted a phrase, internal corrective behavior. Carter frowned. Your kind relies heavily on dissent. Yes, Claire said. It is uncomfortable. But it keeps us awake. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as the index increased its recording depth. Emotional tone. Linguistic structure. Intent markers. Claire's speech showed no deception. Walsh leaned back. You admit you could dominate? Yes. And you claim you choose not to? Yes. Why should the galaxy trust that choice? He demanded. Claire met his gaze steadily. You should not trust it blindly, she said. You should watch us. That answer surprised them. We are not asking to be feared, she continued. And not to be excused. Only to be judged by our actions over time. The index core pulsed brighter. Counselor Maria asked quietly, and if the galaxy turns against you? Claire paused. For the first time her expression showed weight. Then we will have another choice to make, she said. And history shows we take those choices seriously. The silence that followed was heavy but not hostile. The index processed rapidly now, pulling from centuries of human records. Court decisions, treaties, protest movements, art that questioned authority, stories that warned against unchecked power. A new note appeared in the system's private log. Conscious restraint detected. Pattern reinforced through culture. No species had ever shown that marker before. Linda looked at the data and then at Claire. You built restraint into your stories, she said. Yes, Claire replied. Before we built it into our laws. Walsh exhaled slowly. Stories are weak safeguards. They are, Claire agreed. But they reach where rules cannot. The index finished its recording and dimmed slightly, storing the data for final evaluation. Claire clasped her hands loosely. We are not perfect, she said. We are not safe by nature. But we are aware. And awareness gives us a chance to choose better than before. No one interrupted her. She concluded, if the predator index is measuring potential, then understand this. Our greatest potential is not for destruction. She paused, then added quietly, it is for restraint even when it is hard. The chamber remained silent long after she stepped back. The index had recorded something no algorithm had been designed to expect. Not instinct. Not control. But a species that argued with itself about power, and chose, again and again, to limit it. And the galaxy did not yet know whether that made humanity safe, or something far more complicated. The predator index reached its final stage in silence. No alarms sounded. No warnings appeared. The core hovered at the center of the chamber, its light steady and calm, as if the system itself was taking care with its next step. Dr. Alan Cross stood with his hands folded, watching the slow flow of data. Tom Reed remained at his console, barely moving. Officer Sarah Lane leaned against the railing, her usual alert posture softened by exhaustion. Captain Mark Ellis stood apart from them, his expression unreadable. The galaxy waited. The index replayed everything it had gathered. Biology, history, culture, stress response, recovery patterns, moral decision paths. It did not rush. For the first time since its creation, it rewrote part of its own framework. A new symbol appeared on the main display. Final classification ready, the artificial voice said. The chamber lights dimmed. Across the galaxy, secure chambers opened. Council members paused mid-conversation. Observers leaned forward. The predator index had spoken clearly for thousands of years. What it said next would reshape policy, borders, and trust. The display changed. Conditional apex. No threat rating followed. No numeric scale. Only a written explanation. Humans possess high capacity for dominance, the voice continued. However, recorded behavior shows repeated voluntary restraint. Aggression is present but regulated by conscious choice. Threat is conditional, not inherent. Tom exhaled slowly. It finally did it. Sarah frowned. That's not a normal category. It wasn't built for normal, Alan said quietly. The index continued. Humans are not dangerous due to constant attack behavior. They are dangerous due to potential escalation if restraint fails. Current data shows restraint reinforced through culture, law, and self-correction. Captain Mark Ellis felt a weight settle in his chest. He had expected fear. What he felt instead was respect, edged with caution. The system added one final line. Observation recommended. Engagement advised. Across the Galactic Council chamber, reactions spread in waves. Counselor Henry Walsh stood abruptly. This is unacceptable, he said. An apex classification without enforcement parameters is reckless. Counselor Linda Shaw remained seated. It is honest. Walsh gestured sharply at the display. You expect us to trust a species whose restraint is voluntary? Maria Bennett spoke calmly. Every restraint is voluntary. Yours are enforced because you do not trust your own people. The word struck hard. The council fell into heated debate. Some demanded restrictions on human expansion. Others argued for alliances. A few suggested isolation. But something had changed. The index had not labeled humans as prey. It had not labeled them as monsters. It had labeled them as responsible. And responsibility was difficult to control. On the human delegation platform, Ambassador Claire Morgan listened without interruption. She did not smile. She did not argue. She had expected no praise. When the debate slowed, Linda turned to her. Your species has been classified as conditional apex, she said. Do you understand what that means? Claire nodded. It means you believe we could be a threat. Yes, Linda said. And that you are choosing not to be. Yes, Claire replied. Walsh leaned forward again. And if that choice changes? Claire met his gaze. Then judge us by that change, she said. Not by what we might become. The index recorded her response. Mark Ellis watched the exchange closely. He realized something then. Humanity was not asking for trust. It was accepting scrutiny. That was rare. Over the following cycles, the galaxy adjusted. Trade routes were planned with human presence in mind, not avoided. Joint oversight councils were created, including humans but not led by them. Observation posts were established, openly with human consent. Humans did not protest the monitoring. They welcomed it. That's strange, Sarah said later, watching the update scroll across the display. Most species hate being watched. Alan nodded. Humans watch themselves constantly. The index continued to collect data. Early signs showed something unexpected. Nearby species began adopting similar systems of restraint. Internal debate increased. Cultural expression expanded. Authority was questioned more openly. Some governments resisted. Others adapted. The presence of humans did not cause conquest. It caused comparison. Captain Mark Ellis submitted his final assessment. Humans are not a weapon, he wrote. They are a test. Of restraint. Of patience. Of how power is handled when it is not absolute. Weeks later, the Predator Index issued a quiet update. It adjusted its prediction models for all species. Potential was no longer measured only by force but by control. Alan read the note twice. It learned from them, he said. Tom nodded. They changed the index. Sarah looked at the core, glowing softly. Or reminded it what it was missing. In a small observation room overlooking a distant starfield, Claire Morgan stood alone. She watched ships pass slowly through the light, human and alien alike. She knew the classification would follow her people forever. Conditional apex. Not a crown. Not a warning. A reminder. Humans were not feared because they attacked first. They were watched because, when pushed, they could respond with terrible force. And yet, most of the time they chose restraint instead. The galaxy adjusted its future around that truth. And humanity continued forward, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as a species that understood the weight of its own potential, and carried it carefully.